Hey CryptoKitties friends! I am doing a quick demo on how to calculate shiny fancy cats today because first off I didn't really understand how it worked and was asking questions about it on the stream Saturday because I figure I'm not the only one who didn't get it. But it's more relevant now because there was a unexpected shiny born earlier today, Billie, who was actually born to fancy parents. And this is something that we previously believed was not possible based on what CryptoKitties had said and how the math works out. So I wanted to go through the math and explain how this actually happened to illustrate how this works. So I made a Google Doc for us that I've been sharing in Discord, and it's something that's available, so if you have questions, feel free to ask. But it explains the details about shiny fancies in essentially two parts. There's your shiny fancy chance number, which is something that's determined based on how many traits are in the fancy and the parents that you have, and then there's also your shiny number. So there's two things. Your shiny number being determined based on the genes of your kitty. So here's the formula right down yonder. And that is important. So TFT is the total fancy traits. I've shortened that for the ability to fit it on the screen. But what we'll need to do is some math. So I have one of my kitties as an example, one of the iguana kitties, Bodhi, with a 3 out of 4 parent and a 2 out of 4 parent. And you can click the link to follow along if you want. But what it is for the shiny chance number is you need the total fancy traits. So here in point A, which is 4, minus those dominant in parent A, and remember we had 3, so that makes 1. And the total fancy traits minus the number of those dominant in parent 2, so 4 minus 2 is 2. 784 divided by the total fancy traits, in this case is 96. And they got the 784, that's kind of like the magic CryptoKitties number for fancy or shiny conversions. So now we take this formula, which is 10,000 times A times B, A and B and C being points here in the demo. So times A times B divided by C. And we use these details from step 1 with the subpoints. So 10,000 times the 4 minus 3 is 1, times 4 minus 2 is 2, divided by this number. So we've got the 10K times 1 times 2 out of 196. Which gives you 102 and some change, or 102. So this is important because this is the number that you need to beat with your kitty's genes in order to have your fancy be a shiny. So with that, we'll take these out. We now know that the fancy number is 102. Theoretically, if you had a total fancy trait of 4 minus those dominant in a fancy parent, it would be 4 minus 4, which would be 0. Now this is important to note because it'll come in later. But we know that 0 times anything is 0, so if any of the parents are a fancy, this whole top part of the equation would be 0. 0 divided by anything is still 0. So the math would say that the shiny chance number to be greater than or equal to, there's the catch, would have to be 0. So when you do the math on the kitty genes, normally you're shooting for this fancy number. If your parents are fancies, you're shooting for a literal 0. So super tiny chance, but there we are. So to calculate your shiny number, what you need to do is a little bit of gene string manipulation. So you go to your kitty's genes, and I've got links to all of these if you want to play along with the doc. But in your kitty, you can open CKbox, you can click on the transaction. That takes you to Etherscan here. Under event logs, you will see your kitty's ID and also your kitty's genetic string. So if I took that genetic string, put it in a notepad document, and essentially started breaking it down every 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd go like this until you had a whole bunch of 4-digit numbers. Then paste them all, like if you copy all these, paste them into something like Google Sheets, you'll end up with these characters, and what you want is a sum of all of these characters. So these values here are the genes broken down into 4. This one has a 3 because it started with a 0. But your sum is important. So my sum here is 100,000, 1,327. So if we divide that, or do a mod, there's the math here at the end of this. So you'd divide the sum of your genes by 10,000. So 100,000 divided by 10,000, you still have 10. That doesn't matter. What you need is the remainder, because that's how mods work. So the remainder in this case is 1327, which does not beat that 102 that I had earlier, so it's not a shiny fancy. However, what we had with the shiny Billie, this guy here, who has the fancy parents, his shiny number is 0. And you can prove that by going to his Etherscan as well, checking his genes, and I've actually done that in advance. So I took his gene string here, I broke it down into the 4, pasted it into this spreadsheet here, and here's the magic right there. He's got 100,000 on the dot, which means if you divide it by 10,000, you have 10. The mod there with the remainder, there's no remainder. So his shiny number is exactly 0, which is how you have a shiny from fancy parents. The thing that seems impossible happened today. Hopefully that clears up how to do the shiny math though, because it's something that I got stuck on and I'm not a big fan of math. There are a couple steps you have to do, but overall it's pretty transparent. If you have questions, check in the Discord. We are more than happy to help. I'll have links to the document as well. And hopefully this explains. If there are more questions, let me know. Thank you.